Hello, welcome to the ALEX webinar, Survive, Thrive, and Boost Your Research Productivity. I'm Felicity Dykes, a member of the ALEX Continuing Education Committee. I will be your host for today's webinar. Our presenter today is Marie Radford. Marie is a professor in the Department of Information and Library Studies at the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. She makes frequent presentations on topics that include assessment, professional communication, time management, conflict management, and positive approaches to problematic people. She's co-authored 2 books recently that will be coming out soon. They are Library Conversations, Reclaiming Interpersonal Communication Theory for Understanding Professional Encounters, and the 6th edition of Research Methods in Library and Information Science. Marie has presented with us before, and I'm really glad we have her back with us today. Here are a few logistics for today's presentation. Everyone in the audience is muted to prevent background noise. We don't have interactive chat capabilities with the software we use, but you may comment on today's presentation using Twitter. The hashtag is there on your screen. ALCTSCE. We're not monitoring that Twitter feed, so if you have questions or comments for Marie, please type them into the question box on your screen, and she'll answer those following her presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with the links to the recording, handout, and presentation slides. And now, here's Marie. There'll be a slight delay as we change presenters.
Hello everyone, it's Marie Radford speaking here. I'm really excited to be doing this webinar today, and I'll show you a little bit about my picture here. And so I wanted to start by thanking everyone at ALEX for inviting me back again. It's really a pleasure to do these webinars. I also want to shout out to an old friend, one of my former editors, Stephen Weiberly, who's on the list. Stephen, hopefully you're all well and good at the University of Illinois. Thank you for editing my first book, The Reference Encounter, which is still my favorite. So what are we talking about today? Today we're going to be talking about surviving, thriving, and boosting your research productivity. So I'm going to be speaking for approximately 45 minutes, and at the end we will be reading through your chat questions, so be sure to get those questions into the chat box when you have the opportunity to do so. We're going to be doing identifying research topic. We're also going to talk a little bit about getting ready to write more. So boosting productivity really is something that takes, as you might imagine, a lot of effort and some soul searching, and I'm going to help you a little bit with that today. One of the things that prompted today's webinar was a webinar that I did recently for ALEX on getting organized. And in getting organized, part of our research project, part of doing research projects rather, is having some really great time management, so we can kind of find time and manage our time for our research productivity among all of the other myriad of things that we are responsible for doing. We want to always make sure that when we are embarking on a research project that we're going to synergize and be able to multitask, and I'll talk about what I mean by that coming up. Also, the research part of our job, if we're doing this research for our job, it's not something in addition to our job. It is part of our job. So people kind of think of research sometimes as something extra that we're doing. And I invite you to reframe that and think of that as something that you're doing as part of all the other things that you have on your calendar, your to-do lists and all of that, and blending it in. And so one of the ways that we can make this work for us in a less stressful way is to synergize our work with our research goals. Another thing I'm going to talk about today is how do we manage the research process so that we don't feel constantly stressed. We don't feel that our deadlines are in control of us. Rather, we would like to be in control of our deadlines and what I sometimes call target dates, which is a little less stressful than calling it a deadline all the time. But sometimes in research, we do have a hard deadline. Something could be due. We could be working toward a tenure packet that is due, you know, in X amount of years or in even X amount of months as you get closer, and those deadlines start to loom larger. And then also, I'm going to give you my best advice on how to boost your productivity. So what we'd like to do first before I launch into more of my presentation is to launch a poll with three questions on it. And we'd like to do this pretty quickly. I know there's a bunch of groups out there, and if you could kind of take the majority of the group for your answer, that would be really appreciated. So can we launch the poll? This is kind of fun for me. I can see the answers as they're coming in. Okay, so it looks like close the poll. We have approximately 60% moderately experienced, which is the most, you know, the majority. We also have 33% beginner and only a few very experienced, 7% very experienced, which is actually good for the way that I pitched this presentation. We have the next question. Okay, so I'm seeing with 88% voting that we have a really large plurality of 87% of you who have taken some kind of research methods course at the master's or the doctorate level, but not recently. Actually, it's really good news that most of you have taken a course, even better for some who have taken it recently, because this will be a little bit, some of it will be a little bit of a refresher. Okay, great. Let's go to the last question, please. Okay, I think, oh, we're getting 94%. We're getting a higher return rate. This always makes researchers really excited. We have 94% voting this time. We have 75% job-related research required and 56% personal interest in topic, which is very, very interesting to me. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of overlap with a personal interest. Okay, can we close the polls now? And that gives me a much better idea. Thank you for bearing with me to kind of gather a little bit of information about who you are out there and how much kind of research that related experience that you have, and most of you have had a course already, which is really wonderful. Okay, I'm assuming I have control of the screen back again, and what we're going to do right now is I would like to talk about kind of beginning with the beginning, which is going to be about identifying research topics. So one of the things that I would like to talk about is your strengths and your interest. The most successful researchers are the ones who are passionate and feel really strongly about the particular research that they're undertaking. So if you don't care about a topic, it's going to be a real slog for you as well as the reader. So thinking, one of the things to think about really strongly is what is it that you enjoy? What kinds of questions do you have? Sometimes people start their research with a burning question. If you have a burning question or a burning area that you want to research, that is really something that is very, very I would say, advantageous to you. One of the things that put me on the research path was my burning curiosity about communication and reference interactions. And I got all of these people saying to me in my career as a librarian, oh, you don't look like a librarian, you don't smile, or you smile too much, or you're too intelligent, or all these kind of crazy things that people said to me. And it started to make me wonder about the communication process. And I would say, you know, why do you think these things about librarians? And they would say, and tell me a story about some librarian who wasn't very nice to them interpersonally, and then they judged librarians by that. That got me interested in this whole question of what makes for a successful reference encounter. And that burning question has carried me through, you know, many, many years of research. So thinking about your strengths and your interests. Be open to new ideas, right? Read those publications. What are you drawn to in the scholarly literature? What topics do you choose? If you take a conference program, what are the ones that you circle that interest you? That's really important. Workshops, webinars such as this one. What really interests you? Talk to the colleagues that you go to see, or you heard about their research, or you read something. People are extremely open now to an email. If someone reads an article I've published and they send me an email and want to talk about it, I'm happy to have a phone conversation with them. So that's a really important kind of thing. You can also browse online conference programs. If you're thinking, oh, I don't have any money to go to conference, it doesn't cost anything to get on the web and to view an online conference presentation. Most of the time they are up there even for people who have not registered for the conference. So if it is something that is proprietary, sometimes you can find conference proceedings later on, either in your own stacks of the library where you inhibit, or you can maybe sometimes order them through interlibrary loan. So these things are really kind of readily available. Other people don't have a burning question, they kind of struggle. They're not really sure what might be a really focus for them. Another thing you could do is to be on the lookout for call for papers. Frequently on the listservs, once you think about getting involved in research, your eye will start to catch the call for papers. Many times journals are going to do a special edition. They're looking for articles. Think about how your work might either fit into that already, or maybe something that you want to pursue later on. Here's something, it might take some time, but here's a suggestion that I was just thinking about recently. Offer to become a reviewer for your favorite journal. This gives you a early bird view at some of the research that's coming down the pike. If you have to review articles for publications, you're seeing what's on that cutting edge, especially in your favorite areas. Another thing that I think is really helpful are research agendas. So you can go again onto your search engines or actually into the databases in LIS, and you can see some research agendas. I pulled this one off of the ACRL research agenda. These are some of the areas that they consider really hot: assessment, institutional relationships, services and collections, digital preservation, scholarly communication systems, library administration and education, and I'm sure that you can see that any of these can open up into much more detailed areas. If you go and look for some research agendas, you will find that some scholars have already laid out what are the burning questions in each of these areas and so forth, and of course ACRL itself. Okay, I want to pause for a second and I want to do an activity. And one of the things that we did was we sent already an activity via email to you. I don't know if if you are in groups, if you've got a chance to print it out. If you didn't, it's fine. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil. If you have the activity form, that's fine. If not, blank paper will be fine. And so here's where we get to the soul searching part of the webinar. And I want you to really take a second to think about these 3 questions. What barriers do you have to writing? What resources do you have to overcome these barriers? And what articles, topics, or books do I want to write? And I'd like you to actually take a minute and write these down. One of the reasons that I'm asking to actually write them down is that it's really very different to think about something in your head than to actually have it written down on paper. It's a very different cognitive activity. It also gives you something to think about later on, kind of a takeaway from this webinar. I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, so the other thing that I want you to think about is how could you organize yourself to write more? And what specific steps? And if you took my time management workshop, one of the things that I talked about in that is to thinking about a specific step that you would have to take example in this example to write more, to have more time to write, to have more time to devote to research, and maybe if you want to jot that down, something very, very specific and actually achievable as well. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to talk more about, you know what, let me just pause before I move on. And let me just also ask one question that I would have asked if we were doing this face-to-face. I was just sharing with the presenters right before this webinar that one of my frustrations with webinars, I don't get the feedback from the audience. I'm kind of talking, you know, to my computer screen. But one of the things I always ask is, what did you learn from doing this activity? You know, so maybe those of you who are in groups after the webinar ends, maybe you might want to kick that around. If not, just kind of think what this kind of activity has forced you to confront, if anything, or have made you learn about yourself. Okay, let's next move to talking about getting organized. Okay, so again, one of the things that people say to me about research is that it's kind of very diffuse, right? The ideas about it, the way that you're going to proceed can be something that feels like a great big iceberg that you have to wrestle with, right? So you're kind of wrestling with this iceberg. A lot of it you don't even see until you really get into it, and can be really hard. So some of the things that I do myself, I always make sure I capture ideas, topics, questions, and thoughts. I'm still back in the paper dimension, but you could certainly open a file and do this. I keep an actual physical paper research notebook. Okay, and in my research notebook, I will print out and keep call for papers. I will write down deadlines if there are any deadlines for call for papers. One of the things that I almost always have on my radar is the Library Research Roundtable. Every year, the Library Research Roundtable of ALA presents 3 or 4 panels of research. Usually 2 of them are juried research papers. And this, usually the submission is around the end of the year, around December. Also the RUSA reference research, if you want to present the following annual convention, it's usually they're due before midwinter. So sometime around December 1st. So I always have those kind of close by. Then I also have my research to-do list, and that could be what is it that I have to do next on a particular project, or right now I have an idea for a new research paper. I have to schedule a meeting with some colleagues to even begin to even think about it, because it's going to be collaborative research. Then your plans and your target dates. When you get into the weeds, and I'll be talking about some specifics later on in this webinar, I always make a plan and I make some target dates. If I do have a deadline, say it's December 1, where I want to submit something, I can't start on, in the middle of November. Otherwise, not only am I stressed out, but I'm not going to have a quality project, to submit. I always keep ideas for future directions. I capture these in my research notebook in the back. I have a section that's like research ideas, because if you don't write them down, I find they just go into the ether, and then later on you're like, what was that thing I was kind of thinking about? And if you're in the middle of a conference, or you want to email it to yourself and write it down later, however it is that you capture your own ideas. Also, we now have citation management tools. Here at Rutgers, we use RefWorks and Flow, and I find that these are extremely useful for keeping things together by different projects, and also extremely useful. Flow and ResearchWorks can be, RefWorks rather, can be shared with colleagues, and I find that to be extremely useful when we're doing collaborating. So moving to my topic about finding and managing time for research productivity, I highly recommend that you do take a look at your time management skills. One of the most important books that I've read on this topic is one by Stephen Covey, who also wrote, the 7 Habits of Highly Productive People. He also wrote Put First Things First, which is about setting your priorities. What Covey says is if we don't know what our priorities are, we're really doomed in trying to be able to accomplish things. He also talks about the time management matrix. Covey says that our time can be divided into 4 quadrants, which you see in front of you. 1, urgent and important. 2, not urgent and important. 3, not important but urgent. And 4, not urgent and not important. And what Covey says is that these boxes are not of equal sizes, but they expand and contract depending on where you spend your time. And he also recommends that we look to quadrant 2. What Quadrant 2 is not urgent but important. And he says what we want to do is we want to expand the time we spend in Quadrant 2 and lessen the time that we spend in the other boxes, especially urgent. When we're working in the urgent box all the time, we're working on crises and deadline-driven projects that are very close deadlines. When we're working in our non-urgent but important quadrant, that's where we're research, planning, writing, training ourselves, recognizing opportunities, like, going to webinars and so forth, and doing all those things that can be put off in our really hectic workday. But what he says is the most important thing is schedule and commit. Schedule and commit. So if you want to work on research, you must schedule time to do it. I actually I'll share with you, because I had a few minutes before the webinar where I was at my desk, I just scheduled myself for 1 research day each semester, week of this new semester. Since I'm starting my classes next week, I'm trying to designate 1 day a week as research. Now, I might not be able to do that. Some meetings, because I'm an administrator of a PhD program in addition to a faculty member, but I'm going to really try to schedule and commit. If I don't schedule it, I'm just kind of open for any meeting that comes my way. If I say I'm going to devote 1 day a week to research, when people say, are you available for your meeting, I could say, no, can we schedule for another day? A very successful librarian that I know published a lot by scheduling meetings with themselves twice a week for 2 hours on his calendar. He would just block out twice a week for 2 hours, and he would say meeting with myself or whatever he would put it on his calendar, and or research time or whatever you want to call it, and that was sacred, and everyone knew it too. So one of the things we have to kind of do is figure out our own style, okay? What works for you? That block time, can you devote some time in the mornings to doing some research, reading or writing? Are you more productive in the afternoon? Are you more productive if you just take your lunch hour and go to the special collections room, which when I was a doctoral student, I was a department head at William Patterson University Library, and I would take my lunch hour and just read in special collections because nobody could find me there. At least I used to fantasize that no one could find me there. And so you have to figure this out. What works for you? Utilizing those small amounts of time, like a lunch hour, or like time perhaps a meeting gets ended early. Yesterday I had a meeting that was supposed to be 2 hours. It was only 1 hour. You have to capture that hour, but you have to have something in mind that you would do for that hour if you came upon it. And that has to do also with keeping in mind your research book, having maybe your research notebook, perhaps having a couple of articles with you at all time that you might be able to read if you have some available time that was unexpected. We all have times that we have a little bit of free time. I mean, we can also breathe, do yoga, or do something, reduce our own stress. But sometimes I find if I can just have a plan for when those times occur, I'm able to utilize those small times better. Otherwise, it just all gets eaten up by, guess what? Email, in my case. Email, which is a constant thing I have to fight against. What I do is schedule email time instead of spending all day there. But I must admit, it draws me a lot. One of the things about research that is also extremely important is breaking our research into incremental steps. I call them baby steps. It's very daunting to say I'm going to write an article. It's not daunting to say today I'm going to write the outline, or today I'm going to do a literature review and pull some important journal articles, or today I've got those journal articles in a file, I'm going to set aside time to read 1 article or 2 articles or whatever might be your baby step. And again, these personal deadlines help. I'm going to have, say, 10 articles read by a certain time, or I'm going to start working on the introduction, or I'm going to start working, looking at perhaps methodology this week. I want to focus on reading studies that have a similar methodology to the one that I want to use, whatever seems to work for you, and put yourself some deadlines on it. So along with the deadlines comes a plan, right? You make a plan for when it is and what it is and how realistic it's going to be for your plan to work. One other really successful strategy is to have multiple projects at multiple stages, right? So you have things that you're just finishing, other things that you're just beginning or thinking about, and perhaps other projects that are in the midstream. If you're on a tenure track and you're looking to do X amount of publications, whatever that happens to be, you have to kind of have a stream of publications, because you can't wait till everything's ready, submit it all at once, because then you're going to run into trouble at the end when you run out of time. So sometimes if you just can jumpstart a project or two, get that going, you can then jump back and work on something that's in more, perhaps you had something previous, which I'll talk about in a minute, that you can go back to. Because after all, right, I know what you're thinking too, there's only so many hours in the day. And listen, no one has any more hours than anyone else, right? So we all have X amount of hours that we're going to be able to work. Now, one of the things that I think is also a marker of people who are successful researchers and are prolific publishers, right, is that they are strategic, right? They are strategic. What do you need to do for what your goal is? So kind of thinking about what is your research goal. If you want, most of you said that your 75% of you said that job-related research is required for your job, for promotion or tenure, okay? So if that's your goal, you have to kind of think very strategically about what kinds of projects do you need to do, what kinds of outlets do you need to publish in, or if it's conference presentation and proceedings, what kinds of things do you want to see on your CV? Covey talks about beginning with the end in mind, picturing the perfect CV for yourself, your perfect resume that you want to submit your tenure or your promotion. And I want to say also that by way of, touching down to earth, I have been on several tenure review committees, both at Rutgers University for librarians at Rutgers University and at universities all over the country for people especially who publish in the areas, of my general expertise. And let me tell you what a joy it is when I see a CV and all the boxes in my mind are ticked. Right? So they have X amount of publications, whatever the university says is required. They have service that's demonstrated to the community by being on committees, by being involved in research in numerous ways, by perhaps being writing for a column, or perhaps they are reviewing, as I suggested, for journals. And that widens also your audience of people who know more about your work, which is really important as well, because what we have to answer to right now is this idea of impact. Who knows about our work, who's citing our work, and so forth. So sometimes I look at a CV and I see that they've done, 15 or 20 book reviews a year. Now, book reviews are very important to the profession, but depending on your university, maybe they don't count very much, but they take a lot of time. On my CV, there are 2 book reviews that I have done in my whole career, right? Because I did a couple and I was like, oh my goodness, right? I can't do this and also be productive as a researcher. So I'm a faculty at a library school, so to me, I have to be very strategic. If book reviews are highly ranked, you can then go ahead and do them. I'm just using that for an example, and nothing against book reviews. I read them all the time and love them. But you must be strategic, at least before you reach your goal. If it's tenure or whatever, your time that you can spend in this kind of stuff could be very, very precious. Okay? Another thing to think about is, what about your subject-related work? If you have a second master's degree or a PhD in another topic, does it count for you to publish in that area for your tenure and promotion? Find out, right? If it does, that opens the green light for you. If it doesn't count, maybe you want to capture those ideas in your research notebook, but put them aside until you reach your goal. Okay? Another thing, and I got to tell you something that I know is going to really be a difficult thing to struggle with, is what can you let go of, if anything? What things that you're currently doing are going to help you for tenure, help you for promotion, help you to reach your productivity goals? What kinds of things can you let go of, even if it might be for the just for the present until you reach your other goals? This is something that we don't like to do. We never like to let go of anything. We want to be president of myself. No, I'm talking about myself. President of everything, secretary of every group I've ever joined, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes you have to let go of this. So I kind of work on this for myself. If looking at my slide here, right? So one of the things that we want to do is rally support. Who's going to help us? Who's going to help us to our goals? Build it into your planning for tenure, as I've been talking about. What are your goals and target dates? And don't just keep this to yourself. Discuss this with your supervisor, if you have a faculty mentor, if you have a collegial mentor, share your plan and ask them for some feedback, right? If you're sharing your plan with your supervisor and your director, maybe you're going to have to negotiate for a little bit of extra time, right? Are you already overcommitted? Do you need help with priority setting? Have you been asked to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z and still publish in time for tenure? And you have to kind of figure out where your priorities have to go. Find out about opportunities in your organization for release time or for blocking that time for research, like I was talking about, 2 hours twice a week. You know, maybe you can wrangle time for that. Well, I was very fortunate at William Patterson. I got to apply for assigned research time, and that was some release time from my library duties as department head to do my research. So it really involves this kind of thought process about where you are in the process and what time is needed. And I made a little list here of the different planning stages for research. And again, you know, my idea is that you should really be in the midst and in different stages in perhaps several different research projects all at once. But you know, the beginning identifying of your topic, as we talked about it, you know, the literature review is key there, and finding that gap. Where might you fit in? Where might your work fit into that gap? Next we move to, you know, being really in the weeds. What method are you going to use? Again, think about your strengths. If you have a strength in a particular method already, perhaps that's where you want to concentrate your energies. Read up on that research methods. Read similar studies. I would suggest you might even want to take a look at a basic text, you know, research methods text to brush up on, and remembering what are all those different research methods, qualitative and quantitative, that are out there. If you feel like you need help, you can get training in a particular method or consult a mentor who can help you through, you know, some of your data analysis. Identify your resources. Again, who's around that could help you? What books, journals, online resources are at your disposal? And then, you know, set a realistic parameter for your research. Maybe you're going to do a very small study, like even a pilot study that's going to be exploratory, and those can get published. They have to be done well, but they can get published as exploratory studies. I think the fun part is actually doing the research. You're doing interviews, interviewing your participants, your focus groups, doing the survey. I think that's really the fun part. You have to, though, realize that probably your most time-intensive part of your research project is going to be in the analysis and the write-up of your results, okay? And, you know, again, beginning with the end in mind, you know, fame and fortune, perhaps more glory than money in our field, but we want to make sure that we're writing and we have our eye on submitting for publication and presentation. And if we have a particular venue in mind, say a journal that we want to pitch it to, begin with the end in mind. Look and see what kinds of things have been published, what it looks like, what are the different parts of the article that are in there. You know, there are usually the journals take a specific style, and they expect to see those different parts. You know, they definitely going to want methodology, they're going to want results, they're going to want discussion, they're going to want conclusion, and so forth. So kind of take a look, and also at the same time see what style they want it in. Is it Chicago? Is it APA? And then you can use, as you're using your RefWorks or whatever citation wrangler, that can already be started for you. Now, I promised I was going to talk about this idea of synergy and multitasking. What I think that we have to think about is, again, there only are so many hours in the day, and how can we fit our research and our research agendas into what we're already doing, so we're not trying to run, you know, I got a fortune cookie that I put on my bulletin board that says, "He who runs in all directions at once gets nowhere," right? So if you're trying to run in a lot of different directions at once, you're really going to be standing still, essentially, right? So try to get yourself, you know, kind of pointed in one or two directions. My advice is to kind of stick to one or two areas, right? So everything then has to kind of synergize and work together, right? So relate your research to work-related projects is one thing that people who are actively working can do. Have you written reports? Have you done innovations? Have you done pilot studies where you work? Are you involved in assessment activities? All of those can be successfully worked into publications. You know, you have to kind of think about it. You have to kind of talk about it. You might need permissions. You might have co-authors if you've done something together with your other colleagues, but that all can help. And when you are looking to kind of synergize your time, these are what I call low-hanging fruits that might already be well on their way to a publication. And then one of the things that I think is important is to think about if you want to first submit work to a professional conference as a poster, paper, panel, then you want to have both that presentation and also you want to convert it into publication. So here's where we're multitasking. A workshop like what I'm doing today, that can convert into a publication on research methods, right? Committee work that you're doing, whether it's in your particular institution or whether it's for an association like ACRL or so forth, that can sometimes be worked into publication. Some of the ACRL committees work, their whole year's work are on publications. So you can kind of investigate, I know the trends one, the academic trends and trends in higher education is one that gets published every year. Do you have papers that were written for one audience that could possibly be rewritten for a different audience? I just came across an article recently that talked about all of the papers that we have written for coursework. So those of you who are closer to having just completed a master's degree or perhaps a doctoral degree, whether papers that you wrote as a student that you could dig them up and you can convert them into a publication. They maybe were written for a professor. Could they be written for a different audience? Frequently with my own students, my master's students, they do some really amazing work, and I always urge them to think about it from the beginning as possible publication. Sometimes you might need IRB approval from your organization if you're going to be doing interviews, right? If it's just for a report, you may not have that. So think about if you're doing assessment activities for your institution, what would you need to do? Would you need to have permissions and so forth, run it by IRB? You know, what does your organization require? Because you can't go back and re-interview people. So if you had that from the beginning, that can give yourself a leg up, okay? Also think about your research methodology publication. If you have used a particular method, maybe you want to publish on that, which you see that quite often, and it's something that a lot of times people don't think about. I mentioned this earlier, really important, find a mentor. Do you have a library colleague who's productive? Can you request a mentor specifically for research in your institution? Is there a subject expert that you know who might work with you? Maybe a former professor who would be willing to read and comment on things. Maybe there are external supports that you could take advantage of. A Library Research Roundtable and also ACRL have mentoring programs that you can apply for. So, you know, the idea here is that you're not in this alone, that you can find a mentor. You can also find a collaborator, a mentor sometimes can become a collaborator with you as well. So I could see that I'm getting sort of close to the end of my time that I said about 45 minutes. But before I end, I would like to talk about a book that I found to be the most amazing book on the subject of boosting productivity. It's by a guy named Robert Boyce. It was published in the year 2000. It's called Advice for New Faculty Members. So that's Robert Boyce. You have it on the screen there, 2000, Advice for New Faculty Members. He has 10 rules for boosting productivity. The first of these is wait. And let me just actually say that what he did for this book is he did research with over 1,000 highly productive people in academia. It's written for faculty, but it's also very good for librarians. He found out what did they do. So they're not just rules he made up. It's research-based rules, okay? Wait. He says, wait for inspiration for the eureka moment and curb your impatience. Waiting requires patience at holding back from rushing and busyness, okay? 2 is begin early, before you are ready. We are never kind of ready to do a huge research project. We actually have to begin before we think we are ready. He says, and I quote, foster early, informal beginnings at tasks we might rather avoid now and do them now, right? 3, work in brief, regular sessions. Do not wait until you have an entire day to write. He found that those who write in, quote, brief daily sessions write with less pain, more productivity and quality, and a higher likelihood of acceptance in prestigious outlets. And he recommends at least a half an hour to an hour every day. I personally cannot accomplish this. So, you know, I can't write every day just because of my crazy schedule, but I try to write as often and as regularly as I can. He also says stop. The idea here is to pause, pausing at times for contemplation and reflection. He suggests setting a timer or using one of the online programs that interrupts you, makes you stop for like 5 minutes every hour, which is also good for your eyes. And if you stand up, it's actually good for your health. Right? 5, balance preliminaries with formal work. He recommends spending about the same amount of time on creating a draft and your outline as on actual writing. Here about moderating overattachment and overreaction, he says share your drafts often and early. Seek help and welcome edits. If you keep everything to the last minute, you can also get really upset when people say you did this wrong, you did that wrong, I would add this, I would add that. You're going to get this from editors, so you might as well share it early and often and not get too over-attached to your own writing. Moderating negative thoughts, he says, you could say to yourself, this project is too big, I'm behind the deadline, I'll never get this done. He says negative thinking is depressing, discouraging, and doesn't get you anywhere. Your emotions, if you work with constancy and moderation, you will have unmistakable superiority in producing manuscript pages and more ease, satisfaction, and joyfulness. So not to get too stressed out, I think, is the message there. 9 is this idea about collaborating and letting other people do some of the work. People who are very productive have collaborators. So this really helps. And then lastly, limiting wasted effort. Failure can come when you're on the brink of success, so take care that you pay attention to follow through and finishing of the project. So you don't have projects that were half done, never completed, and you feel very deflated by this kind of thing. I've seen students who work very hard on a project, they get a little criticism, they junk it and start something new from scratch, and that really is a lot of wasted effort. So take that criticism, you know, ask for criticism, take it constructively, and make your work better. Okay, so I've gotten to the place where I'm going to invite you, if you haven't already, if you have questions, and Felicity, I think, is going to come back in here now and see if there are some questions or some, it doesn't have to be a question, it could be something that you want to ask me to talk more about. Felicity, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Marie. That was a lot of information. I took notes. Crazy. So, yes, we have about 10 minutes here for questions and comments. I was glad to see that we have some people with some experience, so you might have some ideas to share too. I love that exercise where we had to write down stuff, and someone here speaks my mind too. It's more about anxiety and worrying than actual barriers.
Wow,
so
what a great...
Yeah, on your last slide you talked a little bit about the emotions, but maybe you could talk a little more.
Yeah, I mean, but I think what the important thing is, Emily, who posted that, I think that perhaps is maybe the big insight you got from doing that little exercise, that the barrier itself is perhaps worrying too much, and that's why what Boyce kind of talked about, that you can kind of hold yourself back by that negative thinking. I'll never get this done, the deadline, panicking, and that's when the baby steps. To me, when I get really panicked out like that, believe me, I'm not perfect, and I will panic sometimes, but I have to get myself off the ceiling, right, and say, okay, what is one thing you can do now? And I think that thinking of that one thing or those baby steps or something you could do right then and there helps that worry, anxiety. It really kind of cuts it down, because once you start getting involved in it, you go like, I can do that. So if you set yourself what I was calling, realistic goals about what you think you can accomplish, I do believe that within even a short amount of time, sorry, I got to grab water, progress can be made.
Great.
I want the audience to know I did that whole thing without taking one sip of water. I should have stopped. Pause for that.
Okay. At the beginning, you talked about your research notebook. So can you talk more about how you organize it and how you use it?
Okay, so this is also quite individual. The way that I use it, I have, so if you can think about how you're successful about organizing your other work, right? So we all have our work, we all have to get things done. We all have figured out ways to organize. What my research notebook for me is, it's a place that I go to, and it's only about my research. So I don't have other to-dos in there, but I have organized myself with to-do lists. Right, so the front of my book is usually reserved for those call for papers. I leave the first couple of pages blank. I have like a 9.5 by 11 notebook. It's got Rutgers on it. I buy it. Rutgers doesn't give it to me, but it has the pocket thing in the front. So I put my call for papers or anything related to research that I wanted that might be loose paper in there. In the back, I have a section, the last couple of pages, that are for deadlines. For ideas. The deadlines go in the front. My research ideas go in the back. So when I am thinking about something or talking about something or reading about something or the myriad things you do in the day, if a research idea hits me, I write it down. So I carry this, I know you think I'm crazy, but it's actually true. I carry this around with me. Right, so I have in my bag that I carry with me to work, or it's at home when I'm home, it's in my office, it's right here actually on my desk as we speak, and I have this with me. I keep it very close to me. One of my students has one that's very small. She got like a 5 by 7 kind of little book, and she uses that one. To me, I need it to be a little bit bigger. And then I actually write my goals, my plans, what I want to accomplish. Right now, I usually do it by the week. I kind of set weekly goals for myself. I can also think in terms of big projects that maybe I want to start and where I am with them. But I'll actually then kind of have to-do lists. So when I open up my research notebook, I know what it is that I have to do next, right? So it reminds me. And sometimes it's an easy thing. It could be like order a book from ILL, which I did this week, right, that I picked up yesterday. I know I'm going to need that book for a publication that I'm working on, right? Maybe it's scheduling a phone call with somebody. But I also capture my plans and my little baby steps. So if I'm going to be working on something major. I just actually finished 2 books. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but I wound up finishing 2 books. One is just about done. Proofs. We're working on the proofs now. The other one is done and in publication. One was supposed to be done a year ago, which it got delayed, and so that's sort of beyond your control, because this is a nightmare. You don't want 2 big projects ending like that all at once. But in that process, I had my to-do, and it would be very specific. If I had chapters 1 through 7 to proofread, I would proofread chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, and then as I do them, I cross them out, which a really good friend of mine said is better than, making love, when you cross something off, right? And that kind of keeps me on track, and also I can see my progress. Is that too weird? Am I weird?
I like that, how you can become accomplishments as you're going along.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
and then I could look back. I cross out things as I do them. And in my research notebook, if you think, you sit that one day and you go, what have I been doing? You can actually look, everything's there and crossed out, and you can actually see your progress.
great. A bit about the research, steps in the research and how you do different pieces to maximize time. Here's what I'm thinking of is I like to do literature reviews and I just gather article after article after article, but at some point I need to stop. So how do you manage different parts of the research writing process?
Well, here, actually, Felicity, you have identified a really huge, I think it's a time trap for people. You can get stuck in a literature review. You can get stuck in that stage because there's always another something published. There's always another article out. There's always, if you get alerts like I do that tell you, something new has been published in X area, right? You can get really stuck there. So I think at some point you have to think strategically about that plan. I think it goes back to the plan. If you're going to say, I'm going to work on my literature review for X 3 weeks or whatever, at that time I'm going to stop and I'm going to start working on the research design or the methodology or whatever feels right to you to come next, right? And then you can return, you could put this in your plan, which I do. At the end, you can return to the literature later. I mean, if now it is 6 months or 8 months later, and you're just going to be ready to submit something maybe for a conference, maybe you want to return to the literature at that point, right? But I always continue to collect the articles, I just don't read them. Right? So right now, I'll tell you, I'm about to sign a contract. Many of you may know of the book Conducting the Reference Interview that Catherine Ross and Kirsty Nielsen did the first edition. I joined them for the second edition. We're just about to sign a contract for the third edition. I've already opened a file, an electronic file, and a file in, paper file, right, that says third edition, Conducting the Reference Interview. And I stick things or ideas or whatever, but I'm still very paper-based. I do have things in files, but another thing I haven't really talked about much is, and Felicity, I don't know if you or any of you all have this, if you have anybody to delegate to. I have some students who work a few hours a week for me on research. I asked one of them in preparation for this book that's going to take us a year to already do a little lit review for me on what's going on in texting with reference, and I've already got it, and I've got the literature, and I've got her little abstracts that she pulled out of the databases, and I've got it in my electronic file. So you can continue collect, right, but I can't read all that yet, but I know that it's going to be there when I'm going to get there. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Okay. One quick thing, and then we'll have to wrap up. What advice can you give to someone who wants to publish but who has writer's block or does not know what is appropriate to write or work on for their first project?
Okay, so writer's block. I actually almost put this into this webinar, and I was thinking about it today also as I was preparing for it, that there are very specific things that you can do about writer's block, right? One of the things that my students actually, in my qualitative research class, I have a class that's all about writing and writer's block, was to write in a different color font. This student said she uses green, and when she writes in green, no one's ever going to see it. She's just kind of writing like a drafty kind of thing for herself, and that helps to get over writer's block. Another thing that I've heard of very recently, I never tried this yet, but I don't really have writer's block. I have different issues with writing. My big issue, I'll just tell you, is perfectionism, that everything has to be perfect, and that's tough. But writer's block is when you stop, so I say, write in your, like, say you're going to do 2-hour block. They suggest at the end of the 2-hour block, end in the middle of a sentence. Write to the middle of the sentence, and when you come back, your first thing you're going to do is finish your sentence because you know what you were going to do. Another thing that I suggest, and really this is going to sound absolutely crazy. Are you ready?
Yes.
I write when I'm sleeping. If I'm stuck, it's usually conclusions or beginnings, right? A lot of times the hardest thing to write is either the really beginning of something or the conclusion. Before I go to sleep at night, I will ask my brain to work on this while I'm sleeping. And in the morning, I'll sit down and generally I don't know if it's just put me at ease or if I'm more well rested or actually my brain does work at night. I've read this as possible and I find that that helps me. So everybody can try that and then you can email me and let me know if I'm crazy, right? The other thing about this topic thing, if you're beginning and you can't really know what you want to write about, is really to pay attention and learn more about yourself. Again, to browse a conference program and circle the 3 top things you would want to go to, or what was the favorite article that you read recently, or what interests you about any of the things that you're browsing, reading or browsing through journals, and just see what kind of catches your eye. It's a soul-searching thing, thinking about your career too. Maybe you want to go into grant writing. Maybe you want to go into assessment. Maybe you think that you would like to be a director someday. Maybe you want to read about literature on leadership or management. So that's where the synthesizing thing comes in.
Great. Thank you. Those are great tips. All right. Well, thank you, Marie, for this great workshop. And a reminder to everyone, you'll get a copy of the slides, which had a lot of good information, recording, and the handout. I also want to thank our technical support today, Iping Chen Gaffey from the Continuing Education Committee and Megan Doherty from the Alex office. They helped make this work smoothly and helped us through those little things at the beginning. Also, thank you for being here and being part of this session.
My pleasure.
So, the Continuing Education Committee has more opportunities coming up. So the fall webinar series is filled up and we have a variety of topics, so I think you'll all find something to follow up on here. You can get more details on the Alex website. Alex also has web courses, so those are 4 to 6 week long with instructors who work through the attendees, participants, with exercises and readings. And so you get more detailed information on the topics here. And we have e-forums, which are 2-day email discussions. And those are an opportunity to share information and to learn from colleagues. So those are always really fun. And again, the URL at the top there will take you to all the online opportunities that Alex provides. So I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to see you involved in our other activities. So that concludes our session today.